member Braxton, and then member Orr, and then member else.
Member Braxton, for the record. So this discussion is to consider revising or extending the current exit age to age 7. And I see that there are opportunities for improvement for data collection. I don't know how long that would take. And my concern is tabling the discussion until March. We may end up with just similar discussion again, or opportunities to consider improving data. However, we still are, I believe, the purpose of this agenda item was to vote on extending the current age to at least 7. So I would like to consider revising the extended age to age 7 while we also address data issues.
We currently already have a motion on the table, so we will have to vote on that motion. And Dag Ott, thank you for joining us. If that's the incorrect procedure, please let me know.
No, you're correct. You got a motion in a second, so you should either vote on that, or you could do an amendment to the motion, but it's probably cleaner to just hand the motion as it is, then take up the next.
Okay, thank you. We'll go to member Orr and then member else.
Thank you, this is member Orr. A few things. So one, I'd like to point out, back in April, I was in favor of changing the age, and I still am. I do recognize the need for data, and I do know that this data exists. So the things that I am most interested in getting from districts are the students, over the last few years who were considered DT and then found eligible under another category, age 6. That should not be that difficult to find. Once you look back 3 years and look at students who had DT as their eligibility category, you can then trace those students over the next several years. I understand that it might be more difficult to have information on why students were exited. I am far less concerned about why students were exited. Great for them. We don't want students in special education that do not need the services. That's a much less concern, and I understand that's harder data to get. I do think that we should include members from the field in various locations in our rural districts and urban, as well as charter schools that are maybe run more independently and have a smaller section. Those school psychologists and people who are impacted to describe what those impacts could be based on the age that we choose, so that we have their voices in the mix as well. When we come back to it, sounds like everyone would like to come back to this to have the data that they need. But I do believe, as a practitioner in schools, that it is very difficult when you have a kindergartner who comes in to you with a DT classification, but they turn 6 in September, to have enough data to make sure that you are using data-based decision making to help push it. So the age of 6 is problematic in school. Thank you.
Thank you, member Orr. Member else?
Thank you. I just am not clear when we say more data, like, can we be more specific as to what data we need from districts to collect? Because I just worry, this could be another one of those scenarios that depending on how the systems are set up and what that looks like, looking back, there may not be that data to actually collect. We could only get it looking forward, and maybe Catherine could help me on this one, I'm not certain. And maybe it was clear about the exact data pieces that we need to look for. And then one other thing that I think would definitely merit a conversation when we start talking out as far as age 9. I think that definitely is going to impact the conversation on what some of these read by grade 3 retentions could look like in the future as well. I'm not opposed to seeing it go up, but I just think the age go up. I've been in principal or position many times, right? You're trying to make a decision on a 6-year-old that you've had just for weeks in your system. I think that going all the way up to age 9, there could be some unintended consequences of what that looks like with the read by grade 3 retention piece there. And also I think, not that I want more things piled up on a district. I think we need to have some type of ideas if there is a potential resource impact on what this would look like to districts as far as the need and the use for school sites as well as services offered. And so I guess if I could just get clarified what the actual data, extending it out to get more data, what exactly does that, what exactly are we looking for?
Thank you, Member Elf. So definitely we'd be interested in the number of students who exited at age 6. I agree with Member Orr. We don't need to know exactly why. We would assume that they met their goals, no longer required services, which is why they were exited. And good, that's excellent. So primarily the number of students who were requalified at age 6 for any category. So were they exit or not, essentially, yes or no? And then so that would satisfy number 1. We have the 3 questions here. Number 2, how many students identified under DD immediately continued in special ed at age 6, and what were their new classifications? I think that would be very helpful contextual information because it would speak to the resource needs that Member Else was talking about. If we knew what those additional qualification or eligibility categories were, that might speak to the different services that they might need. But again, were they requalified, were they found eligible at age 6 again, or a different category or exited? I still think that might be a good starting point for data. And then number 3, how many students identified under DD that were exited special ed at age 6 and became eligible again at a different category before age 10? That's the critical one, I think, that was helping, was the hinge point of where we were looking to make the decision. Is it age 7? It's should the exit age be age 8? Like, what's that critical point, developmental point that they're re-referred? So I do think that information would be helpful. Member Else, is there anything from a district's perspective that you think would be helpful to capture or reword anything that we've already described?
Not that I can think of offhand, but I'm wondering, is that, Catherine, is that you in the room there? Can I ask you a question? How are you? Good to see you. Do you think there's a world that this can be an easy ask of districts? I mean, the way that all of our reporting is set up now, like looking back, I know moving forward we can start doing anything we need, but is this data going to be easily accessible on a look back?
Thank you for the question, Catherine, for the reference. So that's the critical point. In some districts, that could be easy. You know, I know some of our districts know all of their students by name and face. In other districts, the longitudinal data collection and analysis is not as easy as that. So I think, right, we could, so getting the number of students who were DD at age 6 and then not pre-qualified, that's just a number. Are we just looking at DD? We're just having the conversation, what about students who were in other eligibility categories between 3 and 6 and then didn't requalify? And then those that requalified into a new classification, again, that's going to be a match for some districts. That might be an easy thing, for others, not so. Re-entering the system at a later age, that is the critical. That's where the data gets really messy, and some districts don't have that ability. And then we're also looking at different life circumstances. DD at age 5 and then leaves the state and then comes back at 8, and while they were out of state, they had a traumatic brain injury incident, and then come back. Are we looking at any sort of reclassification, or are we looking at specific lineage for the continuing of TD? So there's quite a bit of questions, or even what about students who exit and then come on to 504s? Or, so it's for some districts, it's easy, for other districts, it's not so easy. And it will take time and effort and collaboration. When we had the meeting with the district data teams, everybody was doing something differently, and so we would have to get some more, I mean, because otherwise we're gonna get any sort of data sets in this response.
And that, I know, like, for me, in my context, in my district, I can tell you right now of the kiddos that were DD and what
Correct.
has happened, right?
Right.
I worry on, in a sense, in the size of Clark or Washoe, knowing when you're talking potentially 30,000 students, getting that data accurately, since we have, again, on the look back, I think, like I said, moving forward, we can do whatever we need, I think, to collect it differently, but I think it could be challenging. I know in my previous role, I think it would be very hard for me to come up with that accurate number in Elko County as well.
Thank you, member Else and team for that information. Member Ford wanted to make a comment, and then we'll go back to the Carson City Boardroom. I see 2 hands raised.
Thank you. I just want to make a kind of an observation and something for the board to look at. I'm gonna say this, try to keep it within the scope of open meeting law. I recognize that the agenda is set in a certain way to, make sure we are communicating what we're talking about, so people can show up and it's all documented. But doing it like that, it causes issues. Like right now, we just had this conversation. I was listening to the meeting earlier, and we're talking about read by grade 3, okay, putting all this emphasis on it, and the legislature is making rules about it, and then we turn around and we're like, oh, should we, continue these services for age 9? Oh, I don't know, we don't have any data about it. It's like, these things, they need to inform each other. We need to be having more of like an integrative, holistic approach to this, and not just these conversations and scenarios, because one affects the other one. And it's kind of crazy making to like be working on this problem, like read by grade 3. And we know, how important that is. And, the importance of, up until age 9, you're learning how to read. And then after that, you are learning other things by reading. So then we're having this, we can't figure out, should we make the exit age age 9 or age 7? It's like, how does that data affect the other things we're doing? How might the big picture change if we're not just looking at this in a silo, but also the opportunities for the other work that we're doing? So again, the way the agenda set is a little frustrating, but to solve these problems, we need to be able to discuss other things that we're working on and different points. So I think we still have a motion on the table, and I definitely support. I don't want to just settle. I don't want to be like, oh, age 7 is good enough, let's move forward. I think that we need to at least have the data or the plan to try to offer this to as many students as possible. And those questions of the data, to me, it's just like, how many kids were, I can't even think of the word right now. How many kids did age, was it the factor for them to not get services anymore? Because yes, 100, we want to make sure our kids are getting those services as soon as they can, go back into gen ed is amazing. But what is the number? What is the percentage in every single district where age was the reason for exiting them early? Like that's the only data we even need. I'm good, thank you.
Thank you, member Ford. Member Lon, and then member Orr, and Director Bowers, I saw your hand as well. Would you like to comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment. I wanted You, Julie Rose, I wanted to say that the recommendations put forward in this presentation are not limited to other options of the board to change the age from 2, 8, or 9, or any other age between that age. I think that it's important to remember too that in the last recommendation, it was emphasized, as it was in previous conversations, that this is not a standalone solution to the problem. It requires that all of the other things are taking place to support it. At a recent national directors meeting, somebody made a comment of, you can't special ed our way out of things. It is not just a special ed issue, and I think we have to be very cognizant that this is just one piece of a very large puzzle that needs to be changed in order to support all of our students. I'm not sure that I think getting the specific number of students who are impacted is very important, and we can try to do that in different ways with our districts. I think we also need to look at the information possibly from other states who have a 7, 8, or 9 range and say how that has impacted their systems and supported their students differently than in states that don't have that age change. So maybe I'm expanding my workload here, but to say that there's additional data that maybe needs to be looked at to help support make this decision. I've really struggled in presenting information to the board because I don't know what data is going to help you make that decision. And I think that's where it's very, just as member Ford is saying, is that this is just a piece of the puzzle. All of the other things have to fall into place to support and make this change possible. So while this change has a potential impact on the special education system, as well as the resources within it, changing regulation, changing eligibility, it is also just a step forward to making our outcomes better for all of our kids. Thank you.
Sorry, this is Christy McGill, Deputy Superintendent, and just to kind of reiterate what Director Bowers and also Member Moore have put forth, to take a look at implementation science of MTSS. And I think one thing that we can get from the field and implementation science is the whole child approach and the need that the field is telling us that we need additional information on that 6-year-old in order to move forward, whether to continue on in special education or not, and 6 is feeling like a little tight. And that is in line with MTSS implementation science, is to move on data-based decision-making, and the field is tough. So maybe that 7 will give the field a little time to do that. And then also, then you guys can take a look at the data to really see if expanding it to 9 is needed. We wanted to add that implementation plan piece.
Thank you. Member Lon, please go ahead. You've been waiting very patiently this whole presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. This is Member Lane for the record. I'd just like to make and so from a student perspective, I agree with what's been said, and I really like what Member Braxton proposed for having the DDA test in well addressing data inconsistencies, because while I agree that having more data would be preferable for a sound decision, it appears to me that this discussion has been going on for quite a while already. So I'm concerned that by the time we bring this back up to the table, we'll have a little more data, but it still won't be what we consider enough to make a decision, if that makes sense.
Thank you. Yes, Member Ford, did you have a comment as well?
I do. I would like to just thank you. I think your comments were really well rounded, and I also agree with Member Livingston. And I would say this. I feel very uncomfortable and will continue to feel uncomfortable about moving the age to 8 or 9 while we're still in discussion about mandatory testing in 3rd grade. That will impact students tremendously. So I do feel comfortable with an age of 7. If we are going to put this on hold until we have more data, I think it would benefit everyone if we said that we were doing so only to look at the impacts of moving the age to age 7. Because I agree with the difficulty of finding the data for students who have exited at age 6 and then come out for age 10. There's so many variables in that could be deceiving, just from a numbers perspective. And because I just really think that the state testing requirement is so important. To Member Ford's, comments, we need to see these things in unison. So I would propose that as we move forward, we think about the recommendation of age 7, to provide the people on the ground the time that they have been asking for in order to make database decisions in an MTSS framework. But that we don't yet muddy the waters with state testing by increasing that age.
Thank you, Member Orr. I agree with what you just said, and I think we open ourselves up for a host of unintended consequences if we entertain age 8 or 9. Age 7 at this point, based on the information that we do have, seems the most reasonable if a change were to be made. Vice President Hughes, you had a comment as well.
Yeah, I think this is a record for discussion about emotion, so I'm gonna be quick. So I was just gonna say, like personally, to folks at NDE who have to try to collect this data we're asking for, I think President Dockwell outlined in the slides the questions we're trying to answer. I would personally feel comfortable, like, even if it's not 100% consistent district to district, like some data is better than zero data, right? Even if it's like, here's the best we can do, here's our methodology, District 1, District 2, here's the best data we have, here's our methodology. We at least then will have something to base a decision off of. It's not lost on me that the whole point of this is because practitioners want more data about students, right? And so I think that they can appreciate that we also want more data to be able to make decisions, but I don't think that data has to be perfect. I think that, again, just the best we can do, where here's the questions we're trying to answer. How would you answer this question as a district? Show us the best numbers you have. And I think for the conversation, that will give us something to make a more informed decision about.
Right, we have Superintendent Wakefield and then Member Ford, and then we're going to circle back to our motion that's on the table.
Superintendent Wakefield, for the record. So acknowledging that I'm entering this conversation midstream, and I know from sitting in the board seat a decade ago that it was always very challenging to think you had made a clear data request, to find out that actually that data isn't either available as you thought, and also knowing what the choke points are as far. Is it a department thing? Is it district thing? Is it actually just current versus future data? So there's a lot of empathy for how hard this conversation is. And so what I wanted to do for my own clarity and hopefully for the team's success here is ask a clarifying question. And Member Hughes, I think you may already be alluding to one of my questions. So I'm hearing inside Nevada data, outside Nevada comparisons to comments from Member Ford and others, and then impact data, impact on the system. Do we have the capacity and resources and personnel to actually do this right? Like, we don't want to put something in place that creates a bigger problem than we actually intend to solve, right? So I believe I feel clear enough on the outside of Nevada study piece. I also feel pretty clear on how we work as a department to figure out the impact side of this. We can see. For the inside of Nevada data, is sample appropriate to your decision making? Like, if we were to say we had a good number of districts, a good number of students represented, it was not 100% because of data limitations from that local district or because of other systems. And so I just wanted to get that clarity, because I think knowing how you all want to go about the decision and what you need for that will help us make sure that we can meet the expectation in the ask versus thinking you need 100% and therefore we can't do it because a few systems don't have that in place. So if you could speak to that piece a little bit, I think that would help us move forward and also do so in a way that works to meet or exceed your bar that you're asking for.
Thank you for the ask. I think so. Yes, a random sample would be appropriate, and explaining the methodology, like Vice President Hughes mentioned, so that we can understand how the data was collected. And then the piece about looking outside Nevada for comparison, we already know what the exit age is in some of those other states. So I guess one of the data pieces that I would find helpful, what general education supports are available? Are they doing strong MTSS? What's a compulsory age of attendance in those states? What does their pre-K programming look like? How robust is are their child find efforts? I think there's a lot of those pieces that would be helpful for us to know, and then all those pieces impact our decision as well. That help.
I mean, others should feel free to chime in as member views. I personally feel comfortable with a sampling. If you think about a huge district in like Clark or Washoe, if they think that like X% of their schools is representative of the district, that's fine by me. It's just having something again to sort of understand the magnitude of the problem we're trying to solve.
All right, and with that, member Ford has one closing comment before we go back to our motion.
Thank you. This was before Superintendent Wakefield chimed in. I was just gonna say, and I agree that from my experience on this board and other boards, even though my impulse would normally be like, let's just move it to 7, let's get some traction done, let's more kids. But the amount of work it's gonna take to move that needle to 7 is the same amount of work it would take whether we chose 8 or 9. And I believe that if we were to, put all these changes and all the work on to move it to 7 and then do about the data. And if we determined, I think we would like to look at 8 or 9, it's just not gonna happen. We're gonna then be, hit with like, oh, well, we've already put all this work in to do this. Maybe let's get 2 years of data, reconsider this, talk about it later. So that's what I was gonna say and what I still believe. But then I really like the comments that you just gave, Superintendent Wakefield. I think this is also a really good opportunity to see what we can do, because we do have new leadership and we do have a relatively new, fresh board and board members. And this could be, I agree. I think the sampling size is just fine, but we need some data. There's like no data here. And I think it could be a really good, fresh start to something so important as this, to this board to agree to put our trust in you, that you are understanding as I think that board member, board president Doc was really clear on the data that she was looking for. Your comments right now seem like we're all on the same page. And I just want to also remind that member Hudson does have a motion on the table currently, so we should respect that. And even though I would like to make things move quick, we do have the holidays coming up. And so I think March is a pretty good, reasonable timeframe to rediscuss this. And, we can all just assume that we're going to have that enough data to make an informed decision, and that he will now be a little bit more informed on what we are looking for to make a vote on moving forward with this. So yeah, I think we should move forward with that vote. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, so as a reminder, and member Hudson, please jump in if my paraphrasing is incorrect. We have a motion and a second on the table to table a decision until March, when the team has had additional time to gather the targeted data pieces that we talked about today, and extending those pieces may be in a sample format versus representative of every single student in the state. Okay, with that, all in favor, say aye. Aye.
And
Aye. Aye. Okay, I heard 5 ayes. Any nays? Any?
I think you heard an aye from me, although I do have another. I'll bring it up after.
Any abstentions? Okay, did everybody agree to the yay? I have recused myself. Glad to be 6. 6 yeas. Okay, well, motion passes, and we will revisit this item in March. And we are now moving into the hearing portion of our meeting, but before we do that, we will take a 9-minute convenience break, and we will reconvene at 11:30. Oops.
Separate chaos work. To.
Right.
Yes, that's why two of us are in jail. That's just too costly. Yeah, Senate strangers, so. One for me. That's amazing. It's a great share. Right now, girls. So. It's shifting to high school, the discussions now about high school, that's where we're building. That's quite often. It's 8th grade, it's a transition. Because she wants to come down, that's. Share. I see the environmental for area in the last 3 years and students is good for sure. That's for. Good about this one. You just can't keep looking at one grandma. Yeah. My son says he watched. Wanted to think fast, but I'm scared. Okay, let's look at so. Yeah, I don't do that. I'm not just gonna use you. That's the truth. Yeah. It's no different. So like that. And but yes, I see so many kids that. And kids that did not have subscription. Was it? That's it. Wow. It's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because we just can't. If the rate to.
This
That's my own.
What's one tool was.
So the energy wasn't changed.
Say hi.
I mean, this.
Started. That under there. Part of that. It's like I said, yeah.
I know. Yeah, I think so too. How did the meeting go? Just good. Yeah. Okay, good. You should be able to.
Very interesting. I have to share.
Right. It's just serious. Right.
We all started, and I was between drafts, and I said. Isn't like, easy. She's kind of just a little bit. It's like. I don't think you can start bringing that over these, you know, we don't. It's a timing and everything, like the balance. Oh, nothing's. It's still nothing. Just. Especially now. This. Yes. Okay, yes. Oh, so far, I'll be checking on you. Yeah. Speaking, this is like. Focus because you're like, so good, that goes for everybody else. So it's just getting that, and then. It's going to. Replace the parents. Mind balance. Yeah. I was in that was too easy. With integrity versus doing it, but I guess, yes, so it's performance and compliance. You know, I mean, I think that's in terms of science of course, just seeing especially. And it's close. And understanding how you think. Yeah, honestly, I thought they speak and it's so. It's two ways to approach it. And it becomes so. Big. And seeing these undoable words. Then what you see is you can fall to. So that is requirements that becomes a presentation and things like that. Don't and he reveals some. You get all that, but correct response. Right, we're just three complications. Becomes a form. True. That's so good. Do you have any?
They're long that's so. Was there a clock? And he just does a reset the district station. And reset. And or the frequency. That it has changed the way from what you. And it has to be with stuff. It's hard. This can't. It is, it's the same thing. You do it in sports and you come on. Or kind of chances of depth, things as we need to. Yeah, that's. Benefit our kids.
All right, it is 11:32 and I call this meeting back to order. We are going to take an item out of order due to scheduling conflict. We're going to move up agenda item 18. And so at this time, scroll down. The time is 11:33 and we will open up the hearing on agenda item 18. The board orders, excuse me, we are not opening up the hearing because it's still an regular agenda item. We will get to our hearings shortly, sorry. We will receive an informal presentation outlining the statutes and regulations governing educator licensure in the State Board of Education Authority, responsibilities related to the review, sanction, suspension, and revocation of educator licenses. The presentation will also address the authority of various parties to submit recommendations for suspension or revocation of a license. Presenting this item, Greg Ott, Chief Deputy Attorney General, and Jeff Frisky, Director of the Office of Educator Development, Licensure, and Family Engagement. Please proceed when you are ready.
Thank you, President Dockwell, Jeff Frisky, and for the record. The statute is pretty clear. It's NRS 391.322. It does give allows the superintendent of public instruction, is as me, the board of trustees of the school district, or charters governing board of charter school to bring information to the state board, and it is the state board's responsibility to review that information and make a determination to recommend suspension, revocation, or take no action at all. So that's pretty cut and dry. The teacher does have rights to due process, which if they want to, they can request a hearing officer. And if they do that, that process moves forward with the Department of Administration. And they can also, sorry, got mixed up there. But just going through that NRS, if a hearing is not requested, then the state board can just move forward as I suggested earlier. And I will stop here because let Greg fill in any holes that I left. Thanks.
So thank you, Jeff, and thank you to the board for commenting to my scheduling issues. So Jeff did a great job of laying out the facts. I will try not to overly legalize things, but think about the state board as sort of the judge and the jury in the process, right? You don't start with the judge and the jury. It starts with someone else who brings the complaint. Normally that's a prosecutor. So in this instance, the statute, which is, as Jeff pointed out, 391.322, authorizes three different people or entities to do that. One is the superintendent of public instruction. One is the district board of trustees, and another one is the board of charters. So any of those entities may have reason to believe that a teacher has done something that would subject their license to suspension, revocation, and they then bring that complaint, file it. State board gives the teacher notice of that complaint, has to send them all of the details of the allegations against them. So they then have an opportunity to understand the charges against them and to mount their own defense. As Jeff mentioned, there's due process concerns, so they have a right to a hearing before a hearing officer who then goes and hears the evidence on both sides, and it eventually comes before the state board, usually in the form of a consent agenda item, because the parties have kind of hashed out all of the different details about the allegations and whether they've been proven or not. And then the state board renders its decision at the end of the process. So again, the state board is kind of the end point, not the beginning point. And most of the details regarding hearings and due process are laid out in chapters 391 of NRS and 391 of NAC. But most of those you will not see and probably are not familiar with because this happens for the cases ever get to you. So I'll pause there and open it up for questions or concerns. And if I need to give details on any specific part of the process, please let me know.
Thank you, Dagot and Director Bursky. Any questions or questions for our speakers? You've done a tremendous job. I'm seeing no questions. Very straightforward. Okay, since this is not a voting item, we appreciate your time and information, and we will close out agenda item 18.
Thank you, President, and you know, state board members can always reach out to me individually if they have questions or concerns. Thank you again.
We appreciate that. Thank you so much. Okay, now it is time for a regulatory hearing. Let's see, the time is 11:38, and I would like to call this hearing to order. I'll remind participants to please turn off your microphone or mute yourself when you are not speaking, and remember to turn on your microphone or unmute when you'd like to make a comment. Of course, remember that you're on video and being broadcast live by a live stream on the Nevada Department of Education's website. Please make sure to have signed in regardless of whether you intend to provide public comment. If you have indicated that you would like to provide public comment, please complete a comment card and submit it to Angie in the south or Zach in the north. Please make sure to note which hearing you would like to provide comment for. Public comment may also be submitted to nvboarded, nvboarded at doe.nv.gov. Please make sure to note in the subject or body which hearing your comment addresses. While we have an opening and closing public comment period for comments related to the regulation process, public comment will be taken specifically under each hearing. The times marked on the agenda indicate a suggested starting time, and we may not begin a hearing prior to the time listed. However, should an item take longer, we may begin a workshop hearing later than the time listed. All of today's meeting materials are available on the department's webpage, and copies of the notice are available for review at the sign-in table. And with that, the time is 11:39, and I will open the hearing for the adoption of proposed regulation LCB file number R110.24 regarding NAC Chapter 388 criteria for assessment of language and literacy skills for children under age 6 who are deaf, hard of hearing, blind, or visually impaired. Presenting this item is Julie Bowers, Director of the Office of Comprehensive Student Supports. And Director Bowers, please proceed when you are ready.
Good morning, Julie Bowers for the record. I just want to clarify, we're talking about 11024 or 1112?
Thank you.
10 first.
024, yeah, thank you.
All right. Let me make sure I have. Yes, okay. So, again, Julie Bowers for the record. I am the Director of the Office of Comprehensive Student Services. I have with me today Kate Guzzi, my Assistant Director, as well as Laura O'Mara, the presenting on our third regulation change. To start with our 11024, this is specifically addressing the assessment of language and literacy skills for students who are deaf, hard of hearing, blind, or visually impaired, and under 6 years of age. To refresh everyone's memory, our 11024 proposes to create regulation within Chapter 388 of Nevada Administrative Code to meet the requirements of Senate Bill 203, which was adopted in 2019 and became NRS 388.519. This proposal was workshopped on April 22nd, 2004, and LCB drafted the official language on July 26, 2020. The full language of the proposed regulation is included in the meeting notes and is available online. However, I'm happy to read it in its entirety if you would like.
No, we have those materials. Thank you though for the generous offer.
Just to summarize, NRS 388.519 requires the State Board of Education to prescribe by regulation criteria for school employees and providers of services to assess the development of language and literacy skills by children who are less than 6 years of age and are deaf, hard of hearing, blind, or visually impaired. R 11010-24 addresses the requirements of the statute by prescribing the criteria that such an assessment must satisfy and the required qualifications of the persons involved in the administration or interpretation of such assessment. This regulation also requires a school employee or provider of services that administers such assessment, the employer thereof, to provide the results of the assessment to the parent or legal guardian of the child who is assessed in a prompt and accessible manner. These proposed changes were developed in collaboration with Nevada Special Education Administrators, or our CETA group, and incorporates the recommendations of the Advisory Committee on Language Development for Children who are deaf and hard of hearing, blind, visually impaired, which was a subgroup of the Special Education Advisory Committee. This proposed new regulation does not update or change any existing regulation.
Okay, thank you, Director Bowers. I will now open public comment under agenda item 10. Are there any public comments in Carson City?
Madam President, there are no public comments in Carson City at this time.
Thank you. Seeing none here in Las Vegas. Have any been submitted online?
Madam President, we have one submitted online. It was submitted by Anna Binder. My name is Anna Marie Binder, Chair of the Nevada Governor's Council on Developmental Disabilities and a member of the Commission on Autism Spectrum Disorder. I am submitting this written comment on agenda items 10 and 11 at today's meeting with respect to CASC. I am writing individually as there has been no opportunity to bring this to the full commission for purposes of today's meeting. Agenda item 10, while the intent to standardize evaluation practices is commendable, several issues warrant additional review. The proposed regulation omits explicit requirements ensuring evaluators are credentialed or fluent in the child's primary mode of communication. It does not specify coordination with the Nevada Commission for persons who are deaf or hard of hearing, or any parallel consultative body, even though that commission's statutory purpose is to advise on communication, access, and service equity. The phrase trained in the specific assessment is overly broad and could unintentionally restrict rural access or permit assessments by unqualified personnel. To ensure alignment, the regulation should clarify evaluator competencies, family language access, and cross-agency implementation guidance before adoption.
All right, thank you very much. I will open this item up for discussion by the board. Vice President Hughes.
Thank you, Member Hughes for the record. I just had a quick question. I appreciate laying out the criteria, particularly of tending to the learning modality of the student and languages, and so that feels important. I'm just curious, how many assessments exist that meet this criteria? Because I'm like, it's so specific, which is good. And also I worry, does that limit what the professionals are able to use? But I just have no idea how many assessments actually fit that criteria that are out there that are considered formal assessments.
Julie Bowers for the record, it's hard to put a number on the number of assessments. However, we have already created guidance in evaluating the development of child's language and literacy skills to encompass the broad array of assessments that are available. And we are in the process of, this has gone to the, different committees that were involved for their final review, before we, make our final edits and release the resources. I say that because it's hard to just say this is the set that you can use.
But we feel confident that there are multiple options that would meet the criteria that's outlined here.
Yes, and it is outlined and there is a chapter in the guidance document that we have already did.
Thank you.
Director,
Thanks.
go ahead, Member Orr.
I just had a quick comment and all districts to find qualified personnel.
The hardship, and the shortages have been there and they will continue to be there. I think that we need to do what's in the best interest of the kids and work with our, DHHS to provide the services. And provide assistance.
This is President Dockweiler. My question again is actually about the public comments as well. Do you feel there's been sufficient cross-agency discussion on this work, or are there additional collaborations that would be helpful?
Part of this work was done before my directorship in the office, so there was multiple stakeholder groups involved in both the original composed language. We had to re-workshop it last spring because the time ran out during the pandemic to get the things moved forward. During that time, I continued to work with multiple agencies, including our committee on visual impairment group, as well as our DHS group in the development of all of the resources, and they continue to provide feedback. We met, I think, monthly for a year to review and make sure that all of the information was there. So I would say yes, I feel that we have done a good job in incorporating all of our stakeholders, our partners in the process of not just changing the regulation, but in creating the resources. We have 3 resources that will be released when they're edited, final edits. There's the evaluation and development on child's language and literacy skills, resources for the blind and visually impaired, as well as resources for deaf and hard.
Thank you. Any additional questions from board members? Member Ford.
Just another one regarding that public comment that came in. Is there the portion that talked about the child's primary language, is that something that was considered, or was it determined to leave out? Could you speak on that?
Again, there was lots of work done prior to my directorship. So in the conversations and gathering the resources and creating the guidance documents, it was considered to the point of the group that had made the requirements for the guidance documents for me. So I would say it was not a primary discussion in the development of resources.
Okay, I just wonder, just
From my perspective, it doesn't mean that they weren't the conversations about, and I was not involved in all of the discussions that happened in this process.
thank you. I know that the public commenters sent in her email is very good at noticing little things that might make a difference later or have unintended consequences. I wanted to kind of mention it, that I don't know if the board wants, I believe we could have that looked at. I just wanted on the record that I'm at least looking at that, because I would hate for that to be one of the little things that are left out and then you have to circle back to later.
To the record, certainly we did look at the assessments in light of the child's disability and making sure that those accommodations for those who are deaf or hard of hearing or have visual impairments were part of the assessments, and created the correct
says.
Thank you.
This is number two, just chime in for a second. I think this might be illegal, like splitting hairs, but I'm glad this was brought up because I interpreted, the assessment criteria as being inclusive of language when it talks about, being culturally sensitive, being in the mode of communication of the child. So in my mind, if you were the person administering it, and you were not able to administer and assess, like you would have to have some of those base things in place to be able to actually comply with how it's described and what the assessment is. But maybe that's not the case. So I don't know if there could be clarification there, because I am glad it was brought up, because I just thought it was included. But it was included in the assessment criteria, it's not the administration person's criteria.
And supervisor for the record, I think if I understand correctly, and maybe I'm misinterpreting their native language as well as the accommodations necessary for their disability and somewhat simultaneous or I think that every effort was made to ensure that both the administrators of the evaluation would be in the case of a student who is deaf or hard of hearing, that they would have the skills necessary to communicate with the student either in sign language or any other type of language that the student would be using. So I guess to re-answer the question, I think those considerations were made in the selection. However, there is not a lot of assessments out there, so ensuring that the evaluator has the criteria and the skills necessary to administer the test is also a large consideration in how we, develop the guidance.
Thank you, member Dawson Owens.
Member Dawson Owens. So in the comment that I heard, they wanted the evaluator to be fluent in and out of communication. And so section 2, I think, just kind of says any person who is responsible for administering or interpreting an assessment pursuant to the section must be trained in this specific assessment. I'm just wondering if that means that they will also, so we're saying, we're just assuming that they will be fluent in the mode of communication of the individual being assessed.
Or provide the accommodations necessary, such as interpreter or or to create any adaptations for those who are blind and visually impaired, making sure that they have correct accommodations for the student.
So not to belabor the point, but is that written in there someplace else, or could we add that to make sure that that is included?
May I ask a clarifying question that goes along with that member work? So if a student is on an IEP, any time that they take an assessment, there are assessment accommodations written into their IEP. And it sounds like you were saying that the assessment accommodation would cover their needs during any type of assessment?
Well, that would be a true statement, the most correct. When if you have an IEP and there are accommodations for assessment, however, some of these students that we're referring to in this population may not have an IEP. They may be entering the system because it is again under the age of 6. And so we would assure that in the assessment process, even prior to some sort of eligibility or anything else, that the student has the accommodations that are needed to adequate.
Any other questions from board members? All right, seeing none at this time, I will entertain a motion to adopt the proposed revision to NAC chapter 388 as presented.
Member Braxton, for the record, frozen for motion, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so, I motion to adopt the, language regarding LCD 5R on study dashboard regarding that. on chapter 388 for criteria of assessment for language literacy skills and program 106 for that part of your language.
Thank you, Member Braxton, for the motion. Could I have a second?
Second,
Member Ellis with a second. Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Abstentions? Okay, so moved. I will now close that hearing at 11:57 and open the next hearing also at 11:57 on agenda item 11. This is the hearing for the adoption of proposed regulation LCB file number R111-24 regarding NAC chapter 388 criteria for eligibility for special education and related services for pupils with visual impairments. And presenting this item is Julie Bowers, Director of Office of Comprehensive Student Supports, and please proceed when you are ready.
Good morning. Again, Julie Rose for the record, Director of the Office of Comprehensive Student Services. 111-24 is regulations or updates to the definition of visual impairment. R1124 proposes to amend Nevada's definition of visual impairment as it pertains to eligibility for special education services. This proposal is a result of a 2017 letter published by the Office of Special Education Programs, or OSEP, which clarified IDEA's definition of visual impairment and how states should consider eligibility for special education services. R11124 was workshopped on April 22nd, 24, and LTV drafted the official language in June 2024. In the 2017 letter, OSEP explained that any impairment in vision, regardless of significance or severity, must be included in the state's definition, provided that such impairment, even with corrections, adversely affects the child's educational performance. Nevada Administrative Codes 388.395 and 388.427 currently include specific medical requirements for people to have visual impairment or deaf blindness. This regulation seeks to expand Nevada's existing definition of visual impairment to align with the direction provided by OSEP and to update Nevada's special education eligibility criteria to reflect this updated definition. Specifically, this proposal adds the following language to meet the criteria of IDEA. So, a pupil has a visual impairment and is eligible for special education and related services if an eligibility team comprised of the persons described in subsections 5 and 6 concludes that the pupil has a visual impairment not described in subsections 1 or 2, and by reason therefore needs special education or related services. Again, the full language of the proposed regulation and where it fits into current regulation is included with this meeting and is available online. Again, this proposal was developed in collaboration with our Special Education Advisory Committee, our directors group, as well as the Nevada Vision Services. Again, the guidance, but earlier there has been specific guidance also created our visually impaired population. However, this will require us to look at our eligibility criteria and our eligibility forms for vision to ensure that we make the appropriate changes to those things. So I think this is an important piece of the regulation to come forward because it really expands the definition and allows more students possibility of this. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Bowers. Have there been any public comments or in-person comments in Carson City?
Madam President, there are no public comments in Carson City at this time.
Thank you. Seeing none in Las Vegas, have any been submitted online?
We have one submitted online by Anna Binder regarding agenda item 11. Broadening the definition of visual impairment could improve equity by including children whose vision loss does not meet traditional thresholds. However, without standardized functional vision criteria, the statewide guidance, it risks inconsistent eligibility determinations between districts. It also carries potential fiscal implications by increasing the eligible population without data on prevalence or service capacity. A uniform functional vision evaluation framework and coordinated rollout plan should accompany this regulation to ensure consistent, equitable implementation.
Thank you. Any comments, or excuse me, any questions from board members? All right. Seeing none, I will entertain a motion to adopt the proposed revision to NAC Chapter 388 as presented.
Reviews, I would move that we move forward with our 111-24 updated language.
All right, I'll second that motion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Abstentions? Okay, motion carries. So we'll close that hearing at 12:03 and open the hearing on agenda item 12 at 12:03 as well. And this is the hearing for the adoption of proposed regulation LTD file number R023-25 regarding NAC Chapter 388, revising eligibility standards and service requirements for gifted and talented pupils. Presenting this item is Director Bowers from the Office of Comprehensive Student Supports, and please proceed when you are ready.
Good morning. I am going to turn this proposed regulation over to Laura O'Mara, who is our gifted and talented UPP here at ND.
Thank you, Director Bowers. I'm Laura O'Mara, Education Programs Professional for the Office of Comprehensive Student Services. R23-25 proposes to amend Nevada Administrative Code 388-435 pertaining to the eligibility of pupils who are gifted and talented. This regulation must be amended because it currently requires that cognitive and achievement assessments be individually administered, which creates undue hardships on districts who may not have the resources to administer assessments individually, and it restricts districts who choose to evaluate all students to eliminate potential bias in the referral process. The proposed amendment seeks to rectify this issue and to clarify the regulation by eliminating redundancies and using more concise language. This proposal was developed in collaboration with the Nevada Gifted Education District Administrators (GEDA) team. This group is comprised of school district administrators who oversee gifted and talented education programs across Nevada. The public workshop for this regulation was held on August 13th, 2025 and received no public comment. I'm happy to take questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any in-person public comments in Carson City? I think you're saying no, but we've lost the audio. Uh-oh. We still can't hear you.
Can you hear us now?
Yes.
Madam President, there are no public comments in Carson City at this time.
Excellent, thank you. Seeing none in Las Vegas, have any been submitted electronically?
We have no submissions at this time.
Okay, any questions from board members? Member Ford.
Yeah, I have a question. How long has it been that we've been administering them individually? Is this how we've done it forever and now we're switching to group, or did it go individually at some point?
So I can look up the exact dates for you, but it was originally written to be administered individually, specifically for the cognitive assessments. The academic, the achievement assessments was added. Again, I'd have to double check the specific dates, but in the 90s. And specifically at the time when it also added the specific comments about the SAT and the ACT. Those were specifically allowed to be administered for group assessments. Also, and I apologize, I don't have the exact dates in front of me, but I believe in about 2017, there was the provision of using a rubric that was included in the fiscal note for providing funding for gifted education. So at that time, that rubric did allow for some group administration of assessments. But because that was only written in the funding bill, it was not included in regulations.
So my question and my, I guess, a little bit of wariness around the group aspect is from my experience, first of all, as a GATE student, and also on the CCSD board, because we went through this whole thing, I want to say 2019 or so, and the conversations were through the lens of equity, and there were changes to where every kid gets evaluated. Regardless, because there was a lot of inequities and, racial disparities happening. So I guess I'm just a little, like, with how much leniency does this give to choose groups? Like, who's choosing groups? How many, what does a group mean if they're not going to be, individually assessed? Then is it going to be a free for all? So is it ensuring that every kid gets assessed now, which matches what we were aiming towards, but now it might water it down because and then who's determining whether the groups are equitable or fair? I mean, is there anything like that?
Laura, Mayor, for the record. So this does not propose to change what districts are allowed to do or not, as far as specifically which groups they might consider. Some school districts, such as Clark County, does choose to universally screen their students. There is this very specific distinction between screening, universal screeners, and universal assessment. And so some school districts may still choose to do that. Some may not. That is up to the district. As far as for the actual group size, that would be based off the assessment they select. The assessment have specific guidelines on that and how they can be administered.
I just know there's a lot of misunderstanding around this area, and students who are GATE students are like just as likely to not graduate high school as a kid that's experiencing other difficulties. It's a lot of misconceptions that you are, succeeding in an academic standard. So like what I don't want is to allow some leniency in the assessments to be able to the individual lenses as to how these groups would be compromised. So I don't know if I'm saying that right, but I don't want to cause a problem where we're having to, finding out that there's things happening and kids aren't getting like fairly assessed. This is kind of, I don't know if anybody has any comments about that, but I guess I just want that on the record that I'm not fully understanding how this is going to be different than what we're doing, and if there's any type of specifics that we want to, if there are any specifics the board wants to discuss and put into place to ensure that we're not having problems with this later.
Thank you, Member Ford. And just for clarification, I think that from what I'm understanding is that this language in part is being updated to reflect practices that are currently happening, because some of these assessments are being given as group and not individually, because assessment protocols change over time, and with the use of technology, a lot of tests are now available electronically in group format that weren't necessarily available in the 1990s or whenever some of this was written. That's what I'm hearing. Is that accurate?
Yes, that is. And the intent of this from our data group putting this forward is to be able to identify more students, not less, because this will allow districts to be able to test more students that are valid assessments for determining GATE eligibility.
Thank you. Member Orr, I believe I saw your hand up.
Thank you, President Dottweiler. I just meant that you've already made, and I do believe in practice such as this the happening, but more importantly, the assessment protocols for each assessment are really well defined, and I think that those are the guardrails that are already in place.
And I'm good, thank you.
Okay, member Dawson Owens.
Yeah, sorry, just for my own informational purposes, in the last part, I see that we've changed it 150 minutes a week to 600 a month, and I just wondering if that's because of scheduling or is it because sometimes kids want a poly trip or I can count, or came out or where that.
So the purpose of adding that was just to provide more flexibility for school district. We still want to provide the exact same amount of time that was originally that is expected and provided. It just provides districts more flexibility with their scheduling. So if they might pull students out for a single day a week versus for 30 minutes every day, it just provides more flexibility to districts.
Right, any other questions for our presenter on this item? Seeing none, I will accept a motion to update proposed revision to NAC chapter 388 as presented.
I will make a motion to approve the changes to basically. Yeah, what was it? 388 as presented.
All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Abstentions? All right, seeing none, that passes, and I'll close the hearing at 12:13 and open the hearing on agenda item 13 at 12:13. This is for the adoption of proposed regulation LCB file number R094-24 regarding NAC chapter 389, replacing advanced ed with Cognia for educational accreditation references. Presenting this item is Lisa Ford, interim deputy superintendent of the Student Achievement Division. Ms. Ford, please proceed when you are ready.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is Lisa Ford for the record. This regulation really is a technical cleanup. Advanced Ed is no longer a company. They were subsumed by another company, Cognia. So this is really just cleaning up exchange. So Advanced Ed no longer is in the space, it is now Cognia. So we're just changing names. So we need to make sure that that's conforming within the NAC.
Thank you, Ms. Ford. Any questions for our presenter? Seeing none, I will accept a motion to the proposed revision to NAC chapter 389 as presented.
I'll make that motion to update 389.
All right, I will second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? All right, seeing none. Passes, and I'll close the hearing at 12:15 and open the hearing on agenda item 14 at 12:15. And this is for the adoption of proposed regulation LCB file number R196-24 regarding NAC chapter 388, repealing provisions approving certain assessments for reading proficiency, and presented by interim deputy superintendent of the Student Achievement Division, Ms. Ford. Please proceed when you're ready.
Thank you very much. This is Lisa Ford for the record. Again, the purpose of this is to align the state board regulations with the enacted changes through SB 460 by repealing the approved reading assessments by name of Advanced and Math Better and NAC 3. So this is a conforming language change to align with the new bill language that is the statutory requirement.
Thank you. Are there any public comments in Carson City on this item?
Madam President, there are no public comments in Carson City at this time.
Thank you. I see none here in Las Vegas. Have any been submitted online?
We have no public comments submitted online at this time.
Any questions Board representative. Member Hughes.
Thank you, member Hughes, for the record. I'm curious, so as I was looking at the Legislative Council Digest summary, I read that, but I'm rereading, I might have misread it, that it was now allowing Board of Trustees to include a plan for any valuable and reliable standards-based assessment. So to me, it seems like that's not in alignment with previous decisions of the state board around multiple assessments. And so I'm worried that's creating more chaos in the system, that we're saying, here's our set of literacy assessments, we have multiple, but the board approves them. Now, in this particular literacy improvement plan, you can go and choose something totally different if you want. But that sounds different than what you just said. And so could you, clarify that, how that works?
Lisa Ford, for the record, in removing the state board's determination of what can be used, it does allow flexibility for the districts, so that the districts also do not have to feel the need to double test. So if a board, for instance, right now, the board has approved through this meeting, iReady as well as MAP. A district that was using MAP would not be required to also double test using iReady because it's called things.
Yeah, and
That makes sense.
yeah, and that's like the most logical interpretation to me. I guess my concern is, based on this language, it seems like a district could choose something else, a whole different assessment that no one's vetted, as long as they can show that it's valid and reliable. That's not one of the ones that the state's using for other purposes. Now, it wouldn't make a lot of sense, it seems like, for an improvement plan for a district to choose something else because they'd want to measure against the thing that they're using. But this language implies that they could. And is that the right interpretation, that they could choose something totally different that's not in one of the other multiple assessments around literacy that the state's using?
So if I'm interpreting it, and I'll have Greg or Christina correct me if I'm interpreting incorrectly, but the board of trustees could ostensibly choose an assessment and still again double assess students for the purposes of instruction. However, the board has set both the MAP and iReady cut scores as that guardrail for read by grade 3 use. After third grade, the assessments the board indicates are permissible for districts to use, but not.
Any other questions from board members? All right, seeing none, I will accept a motion to adopt the proposed revision to NAC chapter 388 as presented. I will motion to make the proposed changes to NAC chapter 388, file number R19624.
Second.
Thank you, member Ellis. All in favor, say aye. Any opposed?
Nay.
One opposed, Vice President Hughes. Any abstentions? Member Bernstein abstains. Thank you.
I'll go ahead and change mine today, because I actually don't fully understand either.
Okay, so make sure we have member Ford and member Braxton are abstention. All right, member Ford and member Hughes are nay. Braxton is an abstention. Myself, member Else, member Ford, member Dawson Owens, for yeas. Okay, so I'm on. Oh, forgive me, yes. There's still that forum, myself. And Warren. Okay, and Tamara said yay as well. So that's okay. So motion passes. Thank you. Thank you for your patience on that. And I'd like to close that hearing out at 12:21. And I have a point of clarification for the DAS because we did not take public comment on agenda item 13. So can we take that public comment now? And then if we do that, do we need to revote?
But yes, so you can reopen the hearing, take public comment, again. And then. Yeah, we might as well.
Okay. So we will do that. We will reopen the hearing on agenda item 13 and take any public comments. Has any been submitted? Or is any in Carson City?
Madam President, there are no public comments in Carson City at this time.
Thank you. Seeing none in Las Vegas on item 13, I'll look online. Have any been submitted virtually?
We have no public comments submitted online at this time.
All right, thank you. So could I have a motion to replace the advanced ed with Cognia, and updating chapter 389 of the MAC?
I would replace advanced ed with Cognia to update the MAC 380.
That's one second.
All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, so that passes and we'll close that hearing out again at 23. Now moving on 1223 to agenda item 15 and opening the hearing for the adoption of proposed regulation LCB file number R37-23 regarding NAC 391A.300 standards for professional development training for teachers and administrators. Presenting this item is Jeff Brisky, Director of the Office of Educator Development, Licensure, and Family Engagement. Director Brisky, please proceed when ready.
Thank you, President Dockreiler. This is Jeff Brisky, Director of Educator Development, Licensure, and Engagement. I am here for public hearing on Regulation 137-23, amending Nevada Administrative Code 391A.300. This is a regulation relating to education, revising the standards for professional development, training provided to teachers and administrators employed by a school district or charter school, and providing other matters relating thereto. Existing law requires the State Board of Education to adopt regulations to prescribe the standards for professional development training provided to teachers and administrators employed by a school district or charter school, NRS 391A.370. This regulation will revise those standards in Act 391-300. For context, Senate Bill 474 from the 2015 legislative session created a task force to study and recommend learning standards for educators. The original standards were based on the task force recommendations and as recommended by the National Professional Learning Association, called Learning Forward. The Nevada standards became law through this regulation are 093-18 effective September 27, 2018, as recorded in that. The intent of this regulation is to update those Nevada standards as recommended by the department and based on the updated National Learning Forward standards. Finally, today's regulation is the last piece and is a companion to regulation R08823 effective September 2024, which updated NAC 391-065 licensure renewal requirements, and a companion to NAC 391-080, which is the approval process of those continuing education providers. It's a recommendation of the department to adopt this regulation. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Brisky. Are there any public comments in person in Carson City?
Madam President, there are no public comments in Carson City at this time.
Thank you. Seeing none here in Las Vegas. Have any been submitted online?
We have no public comments submitted online at this time.
Thank you. And any board members have questions for our presenter on this item? Vice President Hughes.
Thank you for sharing this and appreciate the move to update to the national recommendations. My one question is really just about enforcement. what happens, this all sounds great on paper. I think we probably could all point to professional learning experiences we've been to that do not meet this criteria. They're still probably happening right as we're talking. So what happens when, can somebody file a complaint? There's some sort of recourse, like what happens if a district or entity is providing required professional learning that does not meet these specifications?
Chair Brisky, and for the record, good question. I don't think we have staff to police every single professional development opportunity, obviously, but they do go through a rigorous process to be approved. And that is in 391.0, that approval process, and they have to attest that they are following these standards. So right now they're based on the old standards until this is adopted through LegCom. And once those are, we'll update that approval process for each one of the providers.
Thank you. And yeah, certainly don't expect you all to go attend and check everything out. But is there a process, like could a teacher say like, oh, I'm being required to do X thing, I don't feel like it adheres to this? Could they submit that somewhere? Could they raise that concern with somebody?
Yes, we do have staff for that. They can email me directly or our educator preparation provider professional that oversees continuing education, and we can certainly reach out to that provider and ensure that they are meeting the standards.
Great, thank you.
Any additional questions, member Orr?
Thank you. Member Orr, for the record. I know that this might not be the time for this, but I do think it's important that the state board has a voice when it comes to professional learning, since we are looking at standards at, evidence-based resources, assessments. Professional learning is the key. And so I'd like to reiterate what Member Hughes is saying, that there should be some way for us to how teachers are implementing their professional learning, the outcomes associated with professional learning, the collection of evidence with professional learning. So I just think I wanted to put it out there again that this is an area where we seem to have little to no information about, and but thank you, Mr. Risky.
Thank you, member Orr. Any additional questions or points for discussion? All right, seeing none, I will entertain a motion to adopt the proposed revision to NAC 391A.300 as presented.
Member Hughes, I will move that we update LCD file R137-23 using the language we just reviewed.
Justin Owens, second that.
Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? Right, seeing none. Motion carries. Close this hearing at 12:30 and open the hearing on agenda item 16 at 12:30 as well. So open the hearing for the adoption of proposed regulation LCB file number R050-24 regarding NAC chapter 389, plan and requirements for placement of pupils in more rigorous courses. Presenting this item is Lisa Ford, interim deputy superintendent of the Student Achievement Division. Ms. Ford, please proceed.
Thank you. This is Lisa Ford for the record. This is to implement the existing statutory requirements in NRS 389, directing each school district and applicable charter school to establish and carry out a plan to identify students grades 3 through 12 for placement in more rigorous coursework in core academic subjects in mathematics, English language arts, science, and social studies. This regulation specifically requires each school district and charter school to adopt a plan that uses state or nationally recognized assessments and performance data to identify students for advanced coursework, a meeting process if a parent objects to a student's placement in more rigorous coursework, and an annual report to the superintendent of public instruction, identifying any subjects for which financial resources were insufficient to offer more rigorous coursework, along with any information around meetings that may have taken place with parents to discuss rigorous coursework and their objections to it. This is actually, and I appreciate Member Hughes bringing this up. It was brought up that it was something that was missed in regulatory language. So it's a long time coming for the department to create.
All right, thank you. Have there been any, are there any public comments in Carson City in person?
Madam President, there are no public comments in Carson City at this time.
Thank you. Seeing none here in Las Vegas, have any been submitted online?
We have no public comment submitted online at this time.
Thank you. I will now open this item up for board discussion and any questions there may be for the presenter. Member else.
I apologize. I may have missed it. I just we had a lockdown drill going on, with this, I guess what is the background on this one? I cringe a little bit when it requests another plan and another report. And I'm wondering, I'm curious, I think some of these things could be happening without a plan or report needing to be required. So is there something, is this from 460, or I guess what is the background on this one?
No, this is actually from an NRS that came out of the 2021 legislative session that was missed in providing regulatory language for. So in 2024, early 2024, a whole bunch of regulations were brought back to the department's attention as having been missed in the development of regulatory guidance. The department began work on this. The actual workshops were back in early spring of 2024. The register, I think, has this one registered as May of 2024 that it came into LCB for language. Went through all of the workshop phases unopposed, and now is finally coming to the board so that it can go on to legislation. And this was statutory requirements. If you remember, else, there's also statutory requirements for middle school and high school where you have to do those academic plans. This is extending it down to grades 3, where we start considering students for gifted and talented education.
Thank you.
Any other questions or points of discussion, board members? Vice President Hughes?
Yeah, member else, you read my mind. I sort of similar question about reporting, but slightly different. Totally get the history and that this is sort of needs to happen given previous laws that were passed. But I'm curious, does the department have any recourse? So I'm assuming the intent of a report is to say, because I think if you didn't offer those courses, you have to justify why and share the financials and that sort of thing, which makes good sense. Can the department say, like, we don't buy that? Like, we don't actually agree with that justification? So you're required, like, what's the ability of NDE to respond? Or is it just another report that's on a shelf somewhere?
So the report at the police report for the record. So the report at the current time is really twofold. So it's one to say, if you're recommending students for GATE work, honors work, AP work, full credit work, that parents may have objections to that for a whole host of reasons. So part of the report, we've been providing a report to the superintendent of public instruction saying, these were offered, these were the objections that we have on this for whatever reasons. The second fold would be for offering, for instance, a GATE program. In order to offer GATE, that's a licensure requirement. So you have to have a licensed GATE teacher in order to be able to do that. Districts may be struggling to either fill that position. Also, there might be budgetary restraints in filling some positions. So that's what that report would be to the state superintendent of public instruction, at which point it would be within the superintendent's purview to ask additional questions.
Got it. Thank you. Yeah, I just want us to make sure that, because I know we do offer or ask our districts to report a lot. And I just always think about the class size reduction reports where it's like, there's a waiver, there's a valid justification, we look at it, and the intent was to try to like keep close to those. And so I think the intent of this was to ensure that more kids have access to these rigorous programs. But there's also a world where districts just sort of say like, yeah, we can't provide anymore. And so it doesn't actually have the intent, and then it's just additional reporting. And so just want to make sure that there's like some sort of pathway. If you know the justification isn't reasonable, that you could sort of put a little more pressure on the district. So thank you for that.
All right, member Orr.
Thank you. I'm just wondering if there's any room for districts or schools to provide reasons for not offering advanced coursework for third, fourth, fifth graders, for instance, because of philosophy. Does it have to be a resource issue, or can they say we don't want to charge students because the research would suggest that's not a good idea? Or is there any way that they can do that, or do they have to prove that it's a resource issue?
So the language of the statute speaks to financial resources. So in the statutory language, this regulation is aligned to that statutory language. It didn't give me latitude to go outside bounds.
Member Orr, does that help answer your question?
Yes, I feel.
All right, any other questions or points of discussion? All right. Seeing none, I would entertain a motion to adopt the proposed revisions to NAC chapter 389 as presented.
Member Das Nellens, I move to approve the revisions of NAC 389 as proposed.
Right, I will second that. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, seeing none, I will close that hearing at 12:39 and the item passes. We'll now move on to agenda item 17, which is not hearing, as hearing but not closed. We will look to an informational presentation on the Nevada Educator Performance Framework, so the NEPF, welcome. 2023-2024 Summative Evaluation and Monitoring for Continuous Improvement Data Review. That is a mouthful. This presentation will provide an overview of statewide NEPF ratings, key findings from MCI data, that's the Monitoring for Continuous Improvement, and an update on the ongoing NEPF redesign field study. Presenting this item is Catherine Hoyt, Assistant Director of the Office of Educator Development, Licensure, Family Engagement. So please proceed when you're ready. And Dr. Pam Paul, excuse me.
Good afternoon. Thank you to the board for having us here today, Superintendent Wakefield, President Toffweiler, and members of the board. For the record, I am Catherine Boyd. I am the Assistant Director of the Office of Educator Development, Licensure, and Family Engagement with the Nevada Department of Education. Joining me at the desk today is Dr. Pam Salazar, who is the Council Chair of the Teachers and Leaders Council of Nevada, which is the recommending body for the statewide performance evaluation system. And our report today is the annual overview of the Nevada Educators Performance Framework, known as the NEPF. This is the summative evaluation data for the 24-25 drawn from our monitoring for continuous improvement interviews, which expressed a need for greater timeliness in completing this required task. It also allows for consolidation of required evidence. It promotes a focus on feedback and professional development to facilitate the use of the NPF as an educator growth system, as it was originally intended. And it does allow us as a department to gather data to inform systemic efforts to streamline the NPF to be more concise. Just to update the board, for the following year, as approved by the board, we now are in our second year of the NPF design and build study. We have a year 2 and a year 1 cohort. We have various districts participating this year. To kind of outline it, we have our districts that are split into year 2 and year 1. Year 2 districts include Park County, who added additional schools this year. We still have an offering from the Public Charter School Authority through Beacon Academy Schools participating. All of Elko County, Lincoln, and Lyon counties are participating. Those are year 2 participants. Schools that added through an open invitation this year in districts Churchill, with their whole district participating. We have 1 school participant from Douglas County, all of Esmeralda County, all of Story County, and 1 participant from Washoe County. We have done introductory meetings to support school leaders, providing document samples and feedback about their experiences throughout the school year. The department is providing a redesigned field study online toolkit that houses all of our rubrics and materials so participants can access what they need efficiently. We've built a Google form for participants to reach out in a timely manner to ask any question and seek support. And the NPF office also hosts bi-weekly office hours for school site leaders as an open forum to ask any questions, and also as a means of statewide collaboration with each other. We've actually had a lot of participation this year on it, so that's been really exciting. All right, now for the meat of our presentation, our summative evaluation data. I just took over the requirements of why we're here. This is per NRS 391-485, which requires an annual review of the statewide performance evaluation system and the manner in which schools carry out evaluations pursuant to this system. So we're going to begin with our NEPF summative evaluation data. We provided the board a list of abbreviations throughout the presentation. You'll see a lot of those specific to the NPF, and we just wanted to make sure that it was clear ordering in the public, alphabet soup educationally. So we hope that this helps for understanding for what some of those different implications. All right, so the first table we're looking at is the summative ratings for the 24-25 school year. It represents an overview of all NPF ratings data. It's listing all educator groups and totals for each licensed position as reported to us by each district. There are totals and percentages for each rating from ineffective to highly effective, and it also includes employees which are exempt per the Nevada revised statutes. This includes a little over 23,000 licensed employees, with a little over 1,500 exempt evaluation. We also wanted to include information about summative ratings for employee classifications that are eligible for size adjustment. So this slide includes summative ratings for positions that qualify for what we call the CSA. This is only teachers and teacher librarians who teach designated classes for the NRS. It lists those that were effective and highly effective, and those whose rating was adjusted due to the class size adjustment. And you can see in the table there that the class size adjustment affected about 2.5% of those positions, giving them an additional weighting in their evaluation and pumping them to the next step. All right, so the next table you're going to see there is NEPF ratings by standard. Again, it's for each employee classification. So this includes other licensed educational personnel as well, not just teachers and administrators. You can see counselors, school nurses, psychologists, etc. The last column that you see there on the end reflects the change between the summative scoring from the previous year. So you can see where that employee position either moves up in their summative score, down in their summative score, and then you can see the one of the teachers there, it just means that it remains the same. All right, to dive into this a little bit deeper, we're going to focus on our administrators and our teachers. And we're going to start with school administrators. So we like to reflect the highs and lows of the standards of which the administrators and teachers, where they performed at the state average. So this is all districts combined. So starting with the instructional leadership standard, the highest standard for all administrators in the state was standard 3, which is creating and sustaining productive relationships. This includes their ability to build relationships not only with their staff, but also within their community. And the lowest performing standard this year was standard 4, which is about creating and sustaining structures on their campus. This can be a lot of things. It can be academic structures, it can be social structures. Moving on to our teachers, we focus on instructional practice standards. The high for our teachers is standard 2, which is that learning tasks have a high cognitive demand for diverse learners. This references that instructional tasks are rigorous and grade level appropriate and place appropriate demands on all students based on their. And then our low standard this year is standard 4. It's historically the lowest standard over the years. This is about students engaging in metacognitive activity to increase understanding of and responsibility for their learning. It is a reference to thinking about thinking and a student's ability to reflect on their own practice as they learn and the action steps that they will take as they are learning to inform their learning journey. The second category, which is the second domain of the evaluation system, is professional responsibilities. So we switch back to our administrators. The high standard this year for professional responsibilities was professional obligations. And the low was standard 1, which is an administrator's ability to manage human beings. So that refers back to their staff on campus. For teachers this year in professional responsibilities, the high for scoring was standard 5, which is student perception. This is a great standard to be high in because it reflects the students' feelings about their teacher and the classroom environment that they're in. So it's reflective of students saying that they feel welcome by their teacher, they feel included within practices of the classroom, they feel that their teacher is invested in the learning and invested in their own personal needs. So we love that. Yeah. And then our low standard is standard 2, which is a reflection on professional growth and practice. This was a consistent theme, and we'll talk about it more as we get into the monitoring for continuous improvement interviews, where teachers often reflected, even in survey data, that they wanted more opportunities to grow in their professional practice and to have stronger feedback conversations with their evaluators to help guide them in their areas. Before we get into any scoring, I can pause for a moment if the board has any questions about standards.
Thing is working. Hold on. We had
Oh, mine works. Mine works too. Okay, we got that. Member Braxton, why don't you go first and then we'll go to member Hughes.
Member Braxton, for the record. Thank you for presenting this. I'm really curious about professional responsibilities and the standards high and the lows in that particular box that we were like managing human capital. Now, how are they ranked individuals? How did this scoring maybe you said that there's just a lot of information. I'm trying to process this. So looking at thank you for the slide, looking at the standards under the professional responsibilities. Tell me more about
Thank you, Member Braxton, for the question. Kathy Hoyt, NDE for the record. And then I'll also defer to Dr. Penn Salazar. She was one of the founding members of the Teachers and Leaders Council that created the building blocks of the standards that you see now. So the way that the statewide performance evaluation system is broken down is into domains within the evaluation in different weighted categories. So for the purposes of, say, administrators, they have instructional leadership standards, which are 65% of their evaluation. Professional responsibility standards, which are 5% of evaluations. And then we also have student learning goals, which is a student performance component, which is 50%. So each domain between instructional practice and professional responsibilities, there are 5 standards, and there are indicators within the standard itself. And so professional responsibilities, it is a lower weight than instructional practice, but it focuses more on the responsibilities of the educator, of the administrator, and how they work with the community, work with their colleagues on campus, where they effectively manage their buildings and their sites to ensure safe and respectful learning environments, and to ensure that students are feeling welcome and safe on campus, that they're still making academic progress. And so it is split up into those different categories. So to go a little bit deeper into managing human capital, and when we say that it's the high and low standard, it doesn't necessarily refer to the fact that it was rated ineffective. It just means that that was the lowest standard overall for that particular year. If we go back a slide, you can see there that even though it was rated the lowest, the overall rating was still a 3.33, which is still within the effective range for that particular standard, if we're looking at administrators and professional responsibilities. So their management of human capital is their ability, again, to manage and lead their staff on campus, and their ability to, again, effectively run their school and work with their employees, and how their employees also have connections with the relationships with families and students. And then Dr. Salazar, anything to
It's a good point. Real quick, I believe the question also was who rates the administrators? Can you just speak to that?
So, Kathy Wood, NDE for the record, thank you, Superintendent Wakefield. The person responsible for evaluating an administrator, it depends on the district, because it also depends on the size of the district. So it can be, in some cases, it's the superintendent himself, because that is the next supervisory evaluator in that district. Other districts break it down through a regional system where they have a supervising administrator that evaluates principals. A principal would typically evaluate their other administrative staff on campus, like an assistant principal or a student success coordinator. And then the administrative staff on campus are responsible for evaluating the teachers and then any other licensed officials. Yes.
Pam Salazar for the record. And the scores that you're seeing are based on an aggregate of evidence from across the year. So a supervisor, whether it's an administrator, a principal supervisor over an administrator or administrator over a teacher, has engaged in observation, conversation, conferences, a review of artifacts and evidence in order to, across the year, determine where that teacher or administrator lies with regards to these particular standards and indicators. And so as a result of the evidence that the supervisor has collected, they then determine the rating across those indicators for a particular standard, which then is, according to the percentages that Kathy indicated a while ago, that's what results in the final score that you're seeing and why you see both the high and the low. But it is based on, hopefully, a number of observations, a number of conversations, and a review of artifacts and evidence that provides then the guidance for that final rating.
Thank you for the clarification, and I would hope in this case that there's enough objective evidence, less subjective evidence, especially when we have some concerns that may come up, real world, real life issues of perhaps retaliation or someone simply not liking another individual,
So I'm very happy to have this information as it was more questions for me earlier. Thank you.
All right, we have, thank you, Member Braxton. Next, we have Member Hughes and then Member Orr.
Thank you, as always, for presenting. As Member Hughes for the record, could you all just share a bit more about the ways in which student experience, student voice is in these? I heard you call it out specifically on that one teacher indicator, but just throughout the process, what kind of piece of evidence that sort of are direct from students get wrapped up into both the teacher and the administrator evaluation?
Thank you, Member Hughes, for the question. Kathy White, NDE for the record. So there are multiple ways in which the student voice is reflected throughout the evaluatory process, both socially and academically. Say, if we're looking at direct evidence from students for the process from the guise of instructional practice, several of the standards and indicators focus on student evidence and their ability, a teacher's ability to collect and generate evidence during instruction and to use that evidence to help them adapt or refine their instructional practice for the lesson. Student evidence would be through their opportunities to have discourse not only with their peers, but teachers, and their opportunities to create and interpret multiple representations of. From more of the professional responsibilities, or you could say the social side, again, the standard 5 student perception standard, it's a lot of student evidence. Again, it's measures the feeling of a student, how they feel within their classroom environment and with the teacher, so the way they perceive their learning environments. And then also through other standards that have to do with, I would say, standard 4 of professional responsibilities when it comes to communities of family engagement. So not only then do you see the student piece in that, but you also see the connection to the student's family and their general feeling and perception of how they are being on campus, how they're being included in academic decisions, and their ability to share and participate in the learning journey.
Thank you. And then I was assuming coming from other surveys that a district might administer directly to students or directly to families, and then that's the evidence that's used in those categories, or does NEPF have a specific set of questions that they're administering direct to students?
Kathy Hoyt, NE for the record. There's no specific set of questions per se. One way that a teacher or administrator could provide evidence to their supervisor to satisfy those standards and indicators would be to conduct a student survey in their classroom. And an evaluator can conduct their own interviews with students to get their perception and have that direct feedback. And then they can also draw from other surveys or other campus information to provide that.
Got it. Great. Yeah. And I would love at a future point, I don't know if this is possible, but I think it'd be super helpful. I know a lot of districts do district-wide kinds of surveys like this to compare some of that data to the NEPF data, like more holistically, like if principals are being rated high and the culture they're creating, is that actually their panorama survey score around school culture? Maybe those, I'm sure some people are using that as the evidence that's influencing, but some may not be. So it would be, but I'm glad that we are thinking about student voice in this. So thank you for sharing that.
All right, Member Orr, and then we will proceed with the presentation.
Great, thank you. This is Member for the record. I think it's really important to note that there are alignment issues here as well. So it's nice to see that so many teachers and administrators, nearly all of them, are effective or highly effective, but that doesn't seem to be in direct alignment with how students are showing, their knowledge and growth in our state. And I do think that we need to consider. So when I look at the highest instructional practice standard for teachers, it's about grade level, standards-based, high cognitive demand tasks for students. So teachers are being rated super high on this area, and yet those same students in those classrooms aren't necessarily showing academic achievement on grade level. And so I think it is just something that as we move forward in Nevada, we really need to make sure that everything is aligned, right? That standards, instructional resources, professional learning, assessment, teacher and administrator evaluation is aligned so that we see charts and graphs that make sense. So when we see that our student achievement is not as high as our teacher achievement, I just think that that needs a bit. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Orr. Presenters, please go ahead with slide 12.
Thank you, Member Orr, for your feedback. Moving on to teacher score distribution. Kathy White, NDE. So continuing on, the data that you're seeing here is representative of the 4 ratings categories in effective, developing, effective, and highly effective. The numbers along the bottom refer to summative scores that teachers have received, and the columns indicate the number of teachers across the state that earn these scores. Kind of going into what Member Orr was sharing, and the lines in between show where teachers ranked by their assigned grades. So you can see there that per the data provided to Nevada Department of Education from each district, the majority of teachers across the state are rated within the effective range. What you're looking at here is a data set over the last 6 years. The colors indicate the different ratings. You can see that the green color, which is the highest one there, represents our effective data. Currently, 68% of Nevada teachers were rated effective. This is actually a 3% decrease from the 23-24 school year. And we like to equate it to a positive trend, even though it is slightly lower, to maybe greater fidelity of implementation of the end. So you're seeing the same data set there for administrators. You can see which rating categories school administrators have fallen into, with again, the most being rated as effective overall. And then the same 6-year data trend there too. Currently, 74% of Nevada school administrators were rated effective, which was slightly higher overall than teachers. So there are data limitations to note, the biggest being subjectivity to human. The district data doesn't necessarily reflect subgroups with a small n size. So if there are employee categories that have less than 10 employees, some of our smaller districts do have that to protect the confidentiality of their evaluations. That data is not provided. The data does not include educators who may have separated from the district prior to their summative evaluation rating. So there are employees that opted to leave for their summative evaluation was provided for the year. It does not allow for tracking individual educator growth from year to year, as data is reported without identifying educator information. Again, it's personally identifiable information is private for the quick serve applications. And then, as always, data reporting is subject to error, as this data is collected through Excel spreadsheet templates that we provide to each district. And we receive over 25,000 lines of data from the districts overall that we evaluate individually. So we're going to go ahead and move on to our summative monitoring for continuous improvement surveys. This is a survey that we are again required each year to provide to each district and employee for all of the employee license categories. It has to be completed by July 15th of this year, so we have an opportunity to decide that data. This year, we had over 7,000 responses, which is probably the greatest response rate that we have had in the last 4 to 5 years. So we want to really thank our district and EPF liaisons for really pushing out the survey to their school site leaders to help us get that feedback. And it's very important to the work we do to have an understanding of the temperature check of what's happening with our employees and our administrators. So we had about 584 administrators and then a little over 6,000 teachers. And again, responses were up slightly from the previous. So we're not gonna go over every aspect of the survey, but again, the board, if they would like to ask greater questions, we can. But one section of questions that we wanted to focus on was feedback. So feedback questions are posed to, we're looking at administrators and teachers here. They're posed to both groups regarding their evaluation process and the feedback received impacting their practice and student learning. The blue represents data collected from administrators and the green represents teachers. The percentages that you see are those who responded either agree or strongly agree. So when asked if they felt their evaluation process was fair, the majority of administrators and teachers agreed, strongly agreed. If they felt that the feedback they received positively impacted their practice, again, the majority of administrators and teachers agreed. And if they felt that that feedback translated into their student learning as well, again, the majority agreed. We are also required to do interviews with each district every year. We conduct those virtually, and if the district requests, we will come out and meet with them in person. We love getting to take our show on the road because it gives us an opportunity to meet with district leadership at their district. Sometimes we get opportunities to see classrooms in action too, which is very exciting for us. And what the interviews do for us is they gives districts an opportunity to review their data so we can address their needs individually and show them specifically what their district data is telling us. Typically, districts then take that information that we share and present it to their own board of trustees each year. They share with us their upcoming professional development plans and how they are incorporating NEPF and teacher administrator growth here. Information collected through these conversations, it supports professional learning between the NEPF and district initiatives such as mentorship programs and RPDP support, which is our regional professional development providers. And this year, I would say probably the greatest trend that we had noticed had to do again with professional development and feedback and opportunities for educators to grow in their practice down to the individual level. So sometimes on campus, when you are making professional development decisions, you have to make them at a district level or whether or not you're having a professional development day and different offerings. And so we did talk about where it would benefit their district based on the data, but also the call, especially from teachers, to really strengthen the feedback conversations that they are having with their individual administrators and evaluators to help guide their professional growth and their needs. So there's some survey data limitations too that we want to acknowledge. It's also, it's local control of survey distribution. What we do is we share, we create the survey and then we share it with our NEPF district liaisons. District liaisons work really hard to push it out to their school site leaders and then the employees of the district. Survey data is limited to those who participated. So it's only the number of people who actually completed the survey, not necessarily representative of the whole. You can see there that we had all 17 districts participate this year. Administrators, we had about 48% based on the total number. And then for teachers, it was about 31% statewide. And so that concludes our presentation on the data report. We also wanted to share with the board a little bit about NEPF legislative updates that are going to be taking place for SB 450. So if the board would like, we can go ahead and continue, or we can pause and take any questions on any of the survey or any of the data.
Any questions at this point from board members? All right, we will hold any questions to the end. Please continue.
Right, so per Senate Bill 460, it's a large omnibus bill that has a lot of different sections in it, but there were several sections that pertained to the statewide performance evaluation system. There are a couple of fundamental changes to the system itself when it comes to student learning goals, and then also probationary observation cycles for educators. But most of the measures focus on accountability in conjunction with the NEPF and support and improve evaluation practices surrounding it. So it's a phased implementation that's actually beginning now, from 2025 and continuing July 1st, 2027. So final aspects of Senate Bill 460 will be implemented into schools by the 27-28. We did put together a calendar for the board, so you can see. The performance improvement plans, the actual plan itself is not implemented yet because the bill requires 2 years of evaluation data that an administrator or educator is receiving 2 years of ineffective or minimally effective evaluation. So that begins with this school year. And the first year that an administrator or teacher would be eligible for performance improvement plan, which we're affectionately calling the GIPS, would be by the 27th. So the way the Nevada Department of Education is supporting these efforts is we're providing, structured feedback and data-informed recommendations for the NEPF. We have a work group where we have gathered a lot of voices throughout the state that have experience when it comes to NEPF implementation. We have several of our district liaisons. We try to have a wide variety, so we have perspective. We have partners from RPDP that are helping specifically with training opportunities and the administrator evaluation certification program, which will be required for SB 460. We have an experienced team of contractors that are helping us develop framework and guidance documentation because there will be a lot of updates there to templates and protocols and guidance that our partners will need to execute this effectively. We have convened our first work group meeting. We actually met November 5th, and the work group is responsible for providing input on drafted regulation language, updated protocols, and edits of frameworks that we are developing. We are going to be sharing this all in conjunction with the Teachers Leaders Council, as they are the recommending body, the states. And we're actually having our next Teachers and Leaders Council next week on November 19th, and we'll be hosting our first regulation workshop specifically for this. So we have a long journey, but we feel like we have a really good team of voices from throughout the state to help us change. And we are excited about some of the updates and measures that we can create to help strengthen, again, the fidelity of information. Okay, so that concludes our presentation. Thank you for having us. We're always excited to likely turn in June to talk about the third year of the NEPF field study redesign and the board's wishes for that. So now, if there are any questions, comments, or feedback, we would thank you.
Thank you so much for the presentation. I had a flashback to last year's presentation where you spoke about the 20,000 lines of Excel spreadsheet that you had to manually go through. I remember at that time we had made I don't even know who we requested that you get some help with that. So any movement in that direction? I see head shaking now. Maybe we can collectively as a board or department assist next legislative session. Support you with your data. Okay, I know Member Hughes has a question. Go to him first.
Hey, Member Shepherd, thanks again. So I would love some advice. You all spend so much time in this and you know the ins and outs of this, and I think a lot of time and energy, has gone into creating an effective tool. One of the things that I hear often in schools, like the real talk I hear on school campuses, is like, it's just easier to give a 3 or higher. I have a billion things to do in my daily schedule. Like, unless there's an egregious thing happening and I'm actively trying to exit a teacher, right? Like, I'm just gonna path of least resistance. And I know that that is an implementation challenge, not a tool challenge to some extent. So how do you all hear that feedback? What do we do about that? Because I think that is probably, my guess is part of at least the concern that Member Orr is bringing up, that some of the lack of distribution is partly because of how it's being implemented. There's probably other reasons as well, but just, how do you all think about that and what can we collectively do about that?
Pam Salazar for the record, I'll take that question. I think two thoughts about that challenge. And I think one of the reasons why we're doing the field study and offering a different approach, if you will, to the implementation process, leveraging the power of the standards, but at the same time, acknowledging the lift that it takes for administrators to work through 19 indicators, for example, in the instructional practices, which then may result in an administrator saying, I have so many other things to be doing. And the idea behind the field study and kind of honing in on the big 5 standards in and of themselves in terms of practice. Number one, we're hoping that first and foremost addresses the time issue, but more importantly, addresses the conceptual issue. Because I do think that, you know, we continue to work, that's my work with RPDP is working with principals. And specifically working with principals and how we observe and support teachers. But I think often because of 19 indicators, we lose thought of what the practices are that we're actually trying to support through observations, through conversations. And with the focus on the 5 standards and maybe not necessarily so precisely with evidence for the 19 indicators, that a principal will now be able to look at it from the standpoint. So what is it that the teacher is doing to enable learning by connecting new learning to prior learning experience, by offering opportunities for students to make meaning, by offering opportunities to engage in a task that has high cognitive demand. So looking at it more from the standpoint of what the lesson should unfold in a way that leads to student learning, and not so much about, I have 19 boxes that I need to fill out. And so a big piece of all of the professional learning opportunities that we're doing around the state, and specifically supporting, as Ms. Holt recognized, is places that are doing the field study, that we're trying to help them see that this is about practice that enables learning, and the support you provide a teacher is what's going to enable that teacher to enable learning. And when we can look at it from the framework of learning versus looking at it from the framework of filling the form out of 19 boxes, then I think we're much more likely to see administrators take on this idea that, gosh, I could support my teachers if I help them connect new learning to prior learning, if I help them understand how they scaffold for high cognitive demand, support meaning making in the classroom, support student agency with metacognition, and constantly checking or understanding, which is standard 5, then we see this a set of 5 standards not as filling out the boxes, completing the form, but we see them as the way, that's how learning unfolds. And that's, I think, the impetus, if you will, behind the field study, the push for this idea of recognizing that the framework really is an outline of the science of learning principles. And when we understand what those principles are, we're going to see greater student success.
Yeah, thank you. Can you remind me then, and I wasn't able to pull it up quick enough, I know when you presented on the first year of the field study, did you see more of a distribution of scores because there was less administrative burden of sort of going through all the paperwork and process? Did that sort of theory bear out?
I can take that. Kathy Wade, NDE for the record. So what we can tell you, piggybacking off of what Dr. Salazar is saying, we noticed when kind of disaggregating data from just our field study participants that some of the evaluation rating went down slightly. And the conversations to support that when we met with our administrators that participated, again, kind of went back to the fidelity of communication that it went to, in their opinion, right? Because it's their individual evaluations, that it went down because it was a greater focus on the holistic scoring of the standard as opposed to breaking it down into all of the different indicators within the standard. So we had some good feedback on that, and we're actually really excited to see the comparison of the year 2 cohorts now that they have had an opportunity to implement that system and have kind of a mindset shift for teachers and administrators to compare that to now our year 1 schools that are coming in. And the conversations that the two groups have been able to have with each other have been strong too, and sharing with them, going into two, there's a little bit greater understanding. Going into changes to the NEPF from the legislative perspective, when we're talking about like the accountability and the fidelity, the NEPF, it is the statewide performance evaluation system. There's no getting around that. It is a requirement for the NRS that it is conducted annually for all licensed positions. And so what SB 460 will be having us create in support of that accountability piece is, for one, they will do greater training for administrators, and all administrators will be required to participate in an administrative certification course, you could say, certified evaluators before they can conduct evaluations. This is a large process that we are developing from the ground up, so we are working on that. But then there's also an administrative evaluation review process that's part of SB 60, which will require the review of evaluations of these 3%, I believe, of evaluations conducted by each administrator to ensure that, again, they were conducted with fidelity and accountability. They will review the evidence collected. They can interview the evaluator and the evaluee to determine if the process was conducted as it should have been. And so that will strengthen the implementation, I think, with that new accountability.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
All right, Member Ford, and that's all I see at this point.
I just have a question for clarification. Is it, my understanding is that this is only for like the 17 school districts, correct?
Happy point, NE for the record. Yes, it's all for the public 17 school districts. Private schools are not required to use the NEPF, and then the state public charter school authority can use the NEPF, and some schools opt to do so, but they are not required to use that as their evaluations.
So I thought, because I was a little confused by the field guide with Beacon having offered to do it, so I guess just, for the record and for the board to remember, it's just like, this is all good and dandy until we start comparing to the charter school authority that doesn't use the same criteria, so. But thank you.
Thank you. Any last questions? Comments from the board? Member Dawson Owens.
Sorry, I was just curious. I think you were talking about that we're at 65% instructional performance, and I think professional school is 20 and student performance is 15, right? This rating. Can you remind me what has that historically always been that way? That's student is a very low amount on that.
And for the record, historically, since the inception of the NEPF, which began in like 2011, there has been refinement of the categories and the weighted percentages. And Dr. Salazar, please correct me if I'm wrong. I want to say these specifically the student learning domain has shifted from as high as 40%, 50%, 40%, now down currently to 15%. There's been adjustments over the years of how that particular domain is calculated based on state assessments, and then a little bit more of a return to individual teacher assessments. And now with SB 460, there is a shift now to what's moving from student learning goals to what they're calling educator growth goals, which will be based on the requirements from NRS with state assessments for certain categories of teachers. So that has changed over the years.
All right, seeing no additional questions or comments, thank you.
Can I ask one quick question? Oh,
Yeah, it's Member Tate, please jump in.
right. Perfect. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Have they determined what the PD is going to look like yet from 460 for administrators, and like what the timeline or the amount of time that that's going to take, or is that still something that's being determined as well? Like, is it kind of like the science of because I worry a little bit about the amount. SB 460 put a large level of additional requirements on teachers and administrators. And I know like administrators that evaluate, early literacy or, K through 3 have to have additional training. And I believe there's more, NEPF training required as well. Is that, do you know what that looks like yet?
Kathy Wade, NEE for the record. So there are different requirements specific just to the NEPF on top of a lot of other requirements coming from SB 460, which the Nevada Department of Education is really working to making sure we're satisfying based on the requirements of the bill. Specifically for the NEPF, there's going to be PD requirements for one, if you are designated to have a plan as a requirement of the plan, that can be broken down into instructional practice, that can be broken down into professional responsibilities. And that would be more of an individual basis for whoever is required to be on the plan as a means of support. SB 460 also just requires in general greater NEPF training specifically for administrators. And that will be satisfied largely through that administrator's certification review program. That is the thing that, and we're building from the ground up. So our work group has already had some discussion on that. But we are trying to tailor it in a way to best meet the needs of all of our districts. We have a diverse landscape. We have some districts that have a larger capacity to satisfy this as opposed to other districts that don't necessarily have the personnel. So RPDP is going to be supporting that. What those trainings will be specifically is what we're working on right now. And we hope to present that in multiple formats for districts to best meet their needs, opportunities for in-person, hybrid, for virtual learning, to make sure that they have that certification requirement. Thank you, Member Ross.
Yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate that. I worry a little bit just with the implementation of all of these new requirements, in addition to all of old requirements of this work becoming not meaningful. And I'm not talking about just NEPF work, but all of the different things. I see a perfect storm of us repeating a cycle where we create a bunch of additional work that only impacts the upper level of a system and doesn't actually impact classroom instruction. So I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Ellis, for the questions. Any lingering questions? Right, seeing none. Thank you, presenters, for all this information. And thank you for your work on continuing to make this process meaningful for everyone in the system. Thank you. Now we will move on to agenda item 19. This is our second public comment period. And which is for non-agenda items within the board's jurisdiction. Each speaker will be limited to 3 minutes and time will be monitored by Vice President Hughes. Written public comment may be submitted to the board secretary at nvboardmd@doe.nv.gov. Our secretary will read written public comments into the record with a time limit of 3 minutes. If the comments exceed 3 minutes in length, the full text will be entered into the record and circulated to the board. Please note that public comments submitted after the board has officially adjourned will not be included in the record. I will begin with any members in person. Are there any public comments in Carson City?
Residents, there are no public comments in Carson City at this time.
Thank you. We have one in-person public comment in Las Vegas. David Gardner, that's you. Please come forward. Thank you.
Again, David Gardner, father of 6 3 special needs kids, and I'm an attorney for 3 special needs kids. I actually just wanted to bring a couple ideas for changes to regulations before this body. NEC 387-131 is where you guys set minutes. And if you look at a kindergarten still at 120, even though most kindergartens are not timed, so that probably should be put at 240. One of the questions I had is under the current bullying law, the schools are required to do bullying investigations to get parents involved, stuff like that, and then there's a process. As far as I know, there's no process if the school fails to do an investigation at all. There's no way to enforce it, and I've had to deal with this specifically where I've made several requests or had made several requests for a bullying investigation, I should say, not exactly. And the school has been responding. So, that's one thing that I think having a process for catching that would be a good idea. One idea that is separate from that, is in my representation of special needs kids, not very often, thankfully, but on occasion we find what I think are pretty clear evidence of retaliation. Problem is, there's really only a couple ways to deal with that. Retaliation can be dealt with through either the Office of Civil Rights, through the Department of Education, and the problems they take reviews of your speech, or through a lawsuit. And I always tell my clients, I was like, if you have 150K, it would take me to do your lawsuit for it. That's a way better use of it than filing a retaliation. So because of that, retaliation is almost never. Because you either need 2 or 3 years to get 150K, or you try to get UCR. So one idea was to have that state complaint process, which is from NAC 3D8. One of the things I've been running into is that one of the things I run into is when I deal with schools, there's a very large difference between what is a student educational record and then also what they have to keep under the idea and required to maintain records to show that they're doing what they should be doing within the IDA. Some schools have taken that to mean they need logs and everything showing they're doing the information in real time. Others have taken that to mean they basically have no record. I would think the first one is better, showing she have logs and stuff like that. So I think that would be a good idea to add. Schools currently write meetings, there's no minutes. A lot of states do minutes. I think that's a good idea. Some states allow parents to record it for the same reason, because there's often fight between parents and school about what actually changes. So if there are minutes or it's one of the bigger ones I highly recommend, this may not be referred to, is cameras in special education rooms, especially in the self-contained classrooms where you have kids who are nonverbal. Probably right now, probably multiple times a month, I get calls from parents from either kids who they found that actually were injured by parapros or stuff like that, or that just random bruises. Kids can't speak, they can't say what happened. So not knowing what's happening in that school, because if you look at the rest of the school does have cameras. It's just in specifically the classrooms for these self-contained kids where they can't speak. I think that would be a good idea.
Thank you, Mr. Gardner.
Okay.
We would love a list though. Do you have a list? Can you provide us a list? I'm sure you have many more ideas of that's. Okay, now we welcome them. Thank you so much. Okay, any online public comment?
We have one public comment that was submitted online by Anna Binder regarding agenda item 9. The department's own presentation acknowledges that Nevada lacks a standardized data system capable of tracking students who enter, exit, or re-enter special education under the DD category. Districts openly admitted they cannot produce valid data regarding exits, transitions, or reclassifications of 6-year-olds. Yet nearly all recommended extending DD eligibility to age 7. Proceeding with a rule change in the absence of evidence possesses compliance and fiscal impacts, which require states to monitor child find and early intervention outcomes. Extending the age limit without a simultaneous mandate for improved data collection, uniform exit documentation, and cross-district coordination would make it impossible to evaluate the true impact of this policy. The NGCDD and CASD both need to review this change through a statewide early childhood lens before any adoption.
All right, thank you. Well, that concludes public comment 2 under agenda item 19. So we'll move on to agenda item 20, future Agenda item requests. Board members are now invited to suggest topics for future agendas. Board member requests will be reviewed by the board president and superintendent, who will determine the most appropriate form for addressing the topic, whether as a formal agenda item for discussion or action, an informational update, or a memo providing additional context and responses to any questions raised. Do you have any agenda item requests at this time? See, member Orr.
Member one for the record. As some of you may know, this past year, EdFac growth scores were slightly different because eMetric, the company that processes the data, made some changes to growth targets mid-year. On behalf of several district data specialists and analysts, I would like to request that eMetric present to us on when they change student growth targets, how those choices were made, and if that will be happening again in the next year. As districts and schools try to make database decisions and know their growth targets in advance, it becomes very difficult when changes are made that districts and schools do not know about mid-cycle in an evaluation system. And so I would like to see eMetric present.
Thank you, member Orr. Great recommendation. Thank you. Anyone else? Member Braxton, member Braxton for the record.
I'd like to see future items that address school safety by way of classroom safety, as well as safe routes to schools.
Excellent, thank you. I see another hand raised in the Parsons City Conference Room.
Chair, this is Christy McGill, Deputy Superintendent. I do want to just make a clarification because it is a safety issue that, and please, if you can help me get the word out there, and hopefully David's still there, that if there are parents that feel their early concerns are not being met, either Safe Voice or the Department of Education is tasked with following up, and that is part of our appeal process. So please help us get the word out about that those are, if people feel like they're not getting anywhere with the school, especially around bullying, please direct them to department. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Superintendent. Mr. Gardner is in the room and he nodded his head. Thank you for that comments. Any other agenda item requests from board members? All right, see none. We'll move on to our adjournment. So thank you all for being here with us today. Our next scheduled board meeting will take place on Wednesday, December 10th at 9 a.m. And unless there are no additional questions, okay, we will adjourn at 1:40. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Right. Yes.
Yes.
Wow, thank you.
My finding like, I'd like to do that function. I have to put the art rooms now. They're going to it's about.